Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pirate Radio. Trump has saved DC yet again. So, Donald Trump apparently has completely set everyone off again, this time by enforcing law and order within DC, moving the National Guard in. So, much like people hate, I don't know, Superman when he busts through their wall and saves the day, people hate Trump for getting law and order back in a completely lawless society known as Washington, D.C., or the District of Columbia. I don't want to get into the legalities of the whole thing. I don't really care at this point. I more care about what exactly we're even talking about here. Like, culturally, what are we talking about here? Those of us who paid attention for a few years noticed that when COVID hit, the lockdowns, and once it started to kind of, oh no, St. George Floyd was killed himself at the knee of a police officer. Then the summer of love began. We had Kyle Rittenhouse. We had many riots. We had lots of damage. We had lots of people hurt. A few people killed. Lawlessness just ran amok. That is one of the many reasons you saw people fleeing cities like Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, what have you. It's actually why Joe Rogan landed in Austin and so many of his comedy buddies followed him, was because everything got so out of hand in California. I had said a few years ago, maybe at the time, I don't exactly remember when, but I do remember saying that things had gotten so out of hand that the only way you're going to get them back under control in major cities, especially the major cities that we've all heard of, New York's, Los Angeles's, what have you, is you're going to have to violate some civil rights. And people don't like to hear that, but that's true. You can look at, there's any number of examples. The most glaring example is New York City. Coming out of the 70s, going into the 80s, it was an absolute shit show of crime. Especially violent crimes, as far as armed robberies, assaults, murders, even rapes, and all kinds of things. It's just out of control. And the only way to get it back under control was to violate some civil rights with some stop and frisk. And I'm not a fan of stop and frisk as a constitutional thing. It's completely against the Constitution. It's completely against your civil rights. It's completely against the Fourth Amendment, among others. But it worked. You had crime drop in New York so drastically that they had 20 years of Republican mayors. It's not like Oklahoma Republican or even Texas Republican, but Republican nonetheless. Basically you had 20 years of a guy like Trump running New York, which is fantastic apparently for crime, or the lack thereof. So if we're talking about Washington, D.C. and the current problems that exist there, now, if anybody's done any little bit of research, which I did very little, because I don't really, this isn't necessarily about the fine details, if you will. It's more of a philosophical take. But if you did dive into some of the details, you would have been told by numerous sources, and then they ran kind of a narrative, a counter narrative, if you will, to support their claims here that people were exaggerating the crime in Washington, D.C. and other places, and that it was actually down. And that is somewhat accurate if you're lying. Or not telling the whole truth, lie by omission. It was down since 2021, when everything, basically the end of 20 into 2021, is some of the craziest crime this nation has seen since the early 90s. So in what, 30 years, 20 plus 28 years, 29 years, whatever it is. Let's just round up, say about 30 years. You had violent crime skyrocket out of control, which means all the other crimes were going to come up as well. Thefts, burglaries, robberies. Basically, you had complete lawlessness. If you're getting away with murders, assaults, things of that nature, then you're probably also getting away with stealing shit. So that's how it worked, and that's exactly what happened. And I'm still gonna have to try to figure out how to do a space while doing this, and maybe one day I'll figure it out. But today is not that day, but the space should be running. Um, if I didn't mention it before, so long as there's somebody actually in there, we will do a space after this. And yeah. Anyway, so back to what's happening in DC. So the narrative that they ran with was that crime is down in the District of Columbia, which is accurate if you go back to 21. But if you go back to pre-COVID and all of the nonsense of the Summer of Love, crime is still up. They also started to run this counter narrative that was basically perception is not the reality. So they did all of these reports and all of these polls that polled people that asked about their perception of crime. And they even started, it was kind of diabolical because they would ask about the city that they lived in or lived near and said, you know, their perception of the crime in their town or city was lower than it normally was, but the perception of crime in other cities, DC's, New York's, what have you, was actually, their perception was the crime was much higher than it actually was. So they ran a counter narrative, which is what you would have to do, is what they normally have to do. And by they, I'm talking about corporate media, who the hacks that they are, and the acolytes of dim-controlled cities, strongholds, because that's the other thing they all have in common, is that all of these cities that are completely out of control are Democrat-controlled and have been for numerous years, and they fell under Democrats. So the crime got bad under them. So you have to run this counter-narrative, start with a narrative, run the counter-narrative, that this is all in your head. You know, like Trump said in one of the debates, a bat to the head is not in your mind, when talking about Antifa, which is a great line that got buried in all kinds of nonsense, but that was a fantastic line by Trump. I wish I remembered exactly. A bat to the head is not in your imagination. It's a pretty good joke, but not a joke. Not a joke. So, they ran with this counter narrative and this major narrative to try to save face and try to point Trump as being this tyrant who is just willy-nilly going to take over this town. And then you had so many people, including the Lolbertarians, who piled on and said, this is a sign of things to come. This is a dry run or a dress rehearsal or whatever, and Trump's going to take over all these cities. No, he's not. He will not. He doesn't want to do that. But DC is right there in their backyard. I've never understood how DC had all sorts of insane crime statistics when you had the powers that be there. Never made sense. Like if I was a senator or a congressperson or a president, or if in any one of my staff, and they had issues with homelessness, crime, violent crime, things of that nature, wouldn't you bring down the weight of the federal government upon anyone who messed with your people or messed with you? And I'll put this on other representatives as well, across the aisle people who don't have the same letter designation to the right of their name, whether it's RD or an I or some other crazy nonsense. Like, you're going to get along. You're going to be with these people. You're going to get along with them, at least to a certain extent. You have to work with these people. So you at least have a working relationship, usually. You would not want that person physically injured, generally, by some crazed person yelling at a lamppost who happened to get a rusty shiv and then stabs that person in the neck or wherever else. And you probably just don't want to see that on your way to work. So much was made about when Lauren Boebert got elected to Congress, and she's a petite little thing who was going to carry a pistol to and from. She got all the necessary paperwork, I guess. I don't know. It's D.C. Who knows? And then there was this big issue that Nancy Pelosi wasn't going to allow her to have a pistol inside the Capitol and blah, 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 fucking blah. And the whole thing that got lost in the debate about gun rights, which is a very important debate, and the debate about her being allowed to carry it inside the Capitol, which, by the way, if any building you should always be able to carry and no one can tell you can't carry, it would be a government building, since the government is not allowed to restrict your rights. Shall not be infringed. But anyway, what got lost in that was the fact that she felt the need to go through all of the hoops that she had to go through to carry said pistol because it was so violent in the Washington, D.C. area and around the Capitol. That's the thing that got lost in all of this. Now, how did that get lost in all of this? I don't quite understand how it gets lost. But that's kind of my point about this whole thing is what's getting lost in all of this is the fact that DC and many other cities, crime is out of control. Tulsa's down the road from me. I've grown up in and around the Tulsa area for pretty much my whole life. You would see bums and transients and things of that nature in the downtown area. They would basically be relegated to like one area. It's all over the place now. The petty crimes are up. Yes, the violent crimes and murders are down, but they're still higher than they have been in recent years. They are doing a good job of policing violent crime with the new police chiefs, as I mentioned in previous episodes. But the fact of the matter is this: you can't go under an underpass in Tulsa without seeing people posted up living there, stuff, carts, shopping carts, dogs, animals, people, and it's ridiculous. And we're just talking about how oh my God, I can't believe Trump's going to do X, Y, or Z in the Washington, D.C. area. He should. He's doing the right thing. If you're not going to do it, someone needs to do it for you. And if the state is abdicating their responsibility or the local municipality is abdicating their responsibility, then it's up to the next institution in line of enforcement to do the thing that they're not doing, which in D.C. is the feds. If it was here in Oklahoma, then let's say Tulsa's not doing what they need to do, then the governor and the state highway patrol and whatever state agencies need to get involved and start to fight crime. The other thing that a lot of these places have in common, which is an odd phenomenon that no one was paying attention to, including myself, is the female police chiefs of major cities. That's weird. Even if you're a woman, that's weird, right? Why is it that we saw that the New Orleans police chief was a female who looked like she was lost, and then we see the DC police chief who doesn't know what chain of command means, apparently, which is it's like day one stuff for cops. Since we've modeled our police forces after military ranking and and structure, chain of command's a big thing in the military. Chain of command's a big thing in the police. That was odd. Why are they all women? That's weird. Why is the police chief of any major municipality a female? Let's be honest. Let's ask that question. Okay, we're not allowed to question that a woman couldn't be in charge of the police, blah, blah, blah. It's just like in Los Angeles, you had a female fire chief. How'd that work out? We all know there's an outlier female that can do the police job. We get it. Or firefighter. But you're outliers. It's true. You don't like it, but it's true. It's 100% true. And I don't care if you like it, because it's true. I'm tired of lying to people. The libertarian disconnect on this whole issue. I get it. As a libertarian, you I should say Lolbertarian. No, I'm going to say libertarian. I see so many libertarians who basically line up with the Democrat or lefties, I should say, on this side for various reasons. They allegedly are under principled reasons of, the cops, blah, 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 fucking blah. But here's the disconnect with you guys. You don't understand human nature. You can talk about the non-aggression principle all you want. It doesn't exist. It doesn't. It's fake. There's so many glaring examples of, well, I'm going to operate by these set of rules, and the other guy goes, yeah, fuck that. I'm not operating by those rules. And they win. Police are a necessary evil pretty much everywhere. They are the form of government you're going to come into contact with most often. And government, at its best, is a necessary evil, is what we all should know, what we all should remember, and we should all keep in the back of our minds, is that this is a necessary evil at best. That in its finest form, it's a necessary evil. Am I saying cops are evil? No, not inherently. Are some of them? Absolutely. Should some of them be cops? No. Should all of them be cops? I don't know. It's a personal choice. But here's the thing. You have to have police. You have to have somebody enforce the laws. Without an enforcement mechanism, it's just something written down on a piece of paper. It means nothing. It's like a mask ordinance. Okay, you need to tell me wear a mask during this Wu flu. What? Now what? I'm not wearing one. And we saw some places where they enforced that harshly. And maybe it's not the Lolbertarians' fault that they don't understand human nature, and it's not all human nature, of course, but it's a lot of human nature to try to dominate, whether in some sort of way, another human being. And that doesn't have to be physically. That can be economically. That can just be in posture. That can be in social status. It could be whatever. But humans are always kind of vying for the top position, or at least to be just a touch above the next person. Yes, it would be great if we all live in peace and harmony and kumbaya fucking yaw. That would be awesome, but that's not how humans operate. But I can understand their disconnect when they don't have any human interaction ever outside of a computer or something like that. We're all picturing the Lolbertarians in our heads right now. I know we are. The actually guy and the if we should do this and all of the this is how things should work. Yes, I understand this is how things should work. It's not how things do work. Okay, so the Lolbert disconnect is it's forever there, and it's forever hilarious, and it's even more so hilarious because they never really understand. They just want to talk about principles and this and that and things that are written on a piece of paper, and those things just really don't exist. I mean, there's flaws with the gold standard and returning to the gold standard. Without making this an economical kind of in the Fed, whatever thing. Let's say you go back to the gold standard. Fantastic. Okay, what's the price of gold? Let's say $1 worth 1 ounce. That would be insane at this point, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, $1 is worth 1 ounce of gold, redeemable, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so if we don't have a trillion ounces, then we can't have $1 trillion. Fantastic. Okay, well, who sets the $1 per 1 ounce? It can be manipulated. It was manipulated by FDR when we had it. Okay, so there's always going to be manipulation. It's just going to possibly exist. So, is there a perfect system? Absolutely not. That's the disconnect of the Lolbertarians. Is the reason there's never a perfect system is because humans are not perfect beings. We have all sorts of faults. We have all sorts of problems, and we have all sorts of things we're trying to do that are going to be at the not be at the benefit of another person. If I'm trying to benefit myself, sometimes that comes at the detriment of another person. Now, does that harm them physically or irreparably? No. But the same thing goes for that person as well. They might want to do something or get something or whatever. It's like if you go into a restaurant and somebody orders the last of the special, whether it's prime rib on a Friday, if they get the last prime rib, as I go get the prime rib, I'm like, oh man, that guy got it. Well, he bettered his life with this lush, sweet, delicious, amazing prime rib that I now don't get by no fault of his own. He kind of hurt me indirectly. So things are never going to be equal. You can take that example for what it's worth. Don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent, but it's the one I thought of on the fly. As I thought about it earlier today, libertarians are nothing more than autists who read too goddamn much. Reading's not a bad thing, of course, but one should go out and touch the grass without a book in his goddamn hand. Now, what the hell else was I going to talk about? That got me pretty far. It got me farther than I thought I would get with that. Forgot, really didn't have much of a show set up, to be honest with you guys. the issue of crime is one of those. They stop and frisk. Pardon the pun. No, actually, take the pun. Enjoy the pun. New York City stopped stop and frisk. What, 10 years ago, roughly, somewhere in there. I kind of, if I remember right, Trump was a fan of it. So candidate Trump was a fan of it in 2016. So of course now it became the worst thing on planet Earth. Even what's his name, little short guy worth $1 billion, Bloomberg, tried to defend it. Under pressure, they had to reel it back. And even when they stopped stop and frisk, that didn't lead to the crime surge that we saw after the lockdowns in the summer of love. That was de Blasio's fault there. It is funny that our current frontrunner for mayor, I say our, not our, because F New York, um, is an idiot. But he's not even talking about crime. He's just talking about like food and housing, which is going to create more crime, by the way. I listen to Ann Coulter with the Trigonometry Boys, which I think she enjoys wine a lot. But anyway, I digress. They are in London, or she was in London, and then went to meet them wherever they are in jolly old England. But she was talking about, I guess she lives in New York City. She was talking about the difference between the crime in New York City versus crime in London. To which those boys were also chiming in and saying that, in London, she was warned that you can't take some sort of purse. She named the purse, I don't know. And don't wear a watch, don't take this purse, blah, 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 because the moped guys are going to take it from you. And she said basically that was kind of charming because for all the London friends, you can go to New York, but you can wear the watch and you can do the purse, but you might get punched in the face or assaulted on the subway or thrown in front of a subway. And it's like, well, these are two different sorts of crimes, and these are both horrific in nature. One is very horrific, one is just like very super annoying and very easily policed, but they don't do it. Which I don't know why they don't do it, but whatever. It's England. They don't do a lot of things right. But crime is one of those things that you're going to have to, when it gets out of hand, it gets to a certain point, you have to have an iron fist to do what needs to be done to get crime back under control. The thing about criminals tends to be is they don't listen to laws, and they only tend to understand the hard fist of justice. And unfortunately, some innocent people are probably going to get caught up in that. And some people are going to be stopped who shouldn't be stopped, and they're going to be questioned and detained and all of the things, and that shouldn't have happened to them. But unfortunately, this is where you're at. When your crime gets so out of control, people are going to have a hard time getting it back under control. It's very difficult to really talk about it or to say these things when you believe completely the opposite of, cops should leave me the fuck alone. They have no right to stop me. So they don't have any right to stop you. But there's the other side of this. You have to understand the time and place in which you live. This is the libertarian disconnect, is they never understand the time and place in which they live. It's always some goddamn utopia that they talk about that could potentially exist if only. Well, the if only never happens. So the only way to get to your if only utopic kind of principled place that would exist where we all just operate, you have to have some law and order. And the guys and some gals, unfortunately, who are set up to provide the law and order need to do so, and they need to be empowered to do so. I'm more than open to someone telling me what they think the idea of getting a New York or a DC or somewhere back under control. I saw a clip today, and I should have pulled the clip and shown it, of they were using a bobcat. It's not actually a bobcat. It was a caterpillar design, but you say bobcat, people who know. They're using it to clean up a homeless encampment, just bucketing the shit up and taking it and dumping it. Like that's what you have to do. That's going to stop so many crimes. Assaults, thefts, all of it. Get rid of the homeless. And you stop so much of this. So much of this. It's the broken windows theory that Giuliani implemented in New York of the fix the broken windows. Then it creates, Tucker's one that's talked about this so much about like if you are in a nice area, a beautiful area with beautiful buildings and pristine, lush landscape and things of that nature, the odds of you doing your minor citizen duty of not trashing the place go up. If you walk down the street and there's storefronts or the businesses are taken care of or the windows are there, it might be an empty space, but it says for lease or rent or for sale or whatever, and the streets are nice and they're clean and there's trash is in the trash can and everybody's just going about their business and cars are going down the road, the odds of you littering are pretty slim unless you're just a giant piece of shit, which I know a lot of you out there are. And that's fine. It's not actually fine, you piece of shit, but hey. But if you take the same scene or the same place with the same scenery, and now there's some transients who have their stuff just sitting there, or maybe a shopping cart full of junk, and they're just hanging out on the street corner, you might litter. You're certainly not going to care as much. You're certainly not going to pick up a piece of trash you see like you would in the pristine place and throw it in a trash can. Just be like, my God, I got to get the hell out of here. I don't want to be around this. And that's another thing that the Lolberts never understand either, is the social contagion of the whole thing and how it affects all the people around them. It's like, is a homeless person who's just homeless and standing on a street, are they hurting anyone? No, technically they're not. Are they bringing down society as a whole? Yes, they are. And by the way, it's not helpful to that person. There's nothing empathetic about letting someone just live out on the street and just wallow in their own bullshit, whether that's drugs, alcohol, mental illness, or whatever. That's not empathetic. I mean, it's hot and cold outside. Here right now, it was like 97 degrees today with 40% humidity. It's fucking miserable outside. The shade doesn't even work. It's hot in the shade. You just sweat in the shade. So to allow somebody to just live out on the street and have no repercussions, or just that's not empathetic. To allow them to just operate as far as feeding their habits, feeding their mental illness, getting worse. You're just going to get deeper into drugs and alcohol. You're going to get deeper into your mental illness, and there's nothing empathetic about that. So yes, I understand that someone's probably thinking or saying right now, or feverishly typing in the comments about how can you possibly say that? What do you want us to do? Go back to when you just had people in mental asylums, and you had them just basically incarcerated, not even at their own will. It's like, well, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. At least if you're an institution, theoretically you can get some help. You can be off drugs. You can get mental help. And sure, did some of them go south? Apparently they did, because they shut them all down. But you can at least go in and fix the institution. How do you go in and fix the underpass of Yale and I-44? You don't. Those people are violent against themselves. They steal from each other. There's rapes that happen, go unreported, sexual assaults in those homeless encampments. All of this goes unreported. And then one day they find a guy burned to death with his 3 dogs under the overpass of 244 in Harvard, who burned to death trying to stay warm in the middle of winter, and probably damaged the bridge, killed himself and his 2 dogs that he had. Is that empathy? Was that empathetic? Did that help that guy? Now he's dead. That didn't help that guy. If he was institutionalized, even against his will, there is a chance that the guy can get better. At the very least, he can't kill 2 fucking dogs. And himself. Well, maybe he could kill himself. I mean, Epstein pulled it off. But the point is that to get crime under control, you have to do the little things. And you're going to have to violate the civil rights of a homeless person or someone else, okay? Now, that violation might be temporary, like 5 minutes. You were detained. My bad. Go on about your business. But then there's the other side of that, of like, if you're detained against your will for 5 minutes, side of the road, they search your car, you're like, fuck that fucking cop, I don't like that cop, that bastard, can't believe he did that. But the other thing it does is it sticks in the back of your head of like, these cops ain't playing around, man. So if you were thinking about, or maybe this was just the day that you were gonna go get some weed or coke or whatever, or you were gonna drive around drinking or whatever. Now it's in your mind. Now you're not gonna do that anymore. You don't want to go to jail. You don't want the cop to hassle you because you know they're out there and they ain't fucking around. And by the way, they don't stop and detain you at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. They stop and detain you at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. That's when they stop and detain people. Cops are pretty good at profiling things that are out of place in a place that they're out of place. Okay? I know we all talk about, or the mainstream wants to tell us how profiling's bad to do and you should never profile. Yeah, that's how you end up dead. We should the damn TSA should profile. Why would they pull me out of line? Not that they ever have, but there's no reason for them to pull me out of line. What 19 dudes look like me flying in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon? Why would they pull any white or black person out of line? I don't get it. Oh, we can't profile. We can't judge. No profiling, no judging. You should profile and judge a lot. It's a survival instinct. Especially if you're a woman, you should profile and judge a lot. Because you're very incapable of protecting yourself physically. So thank God that Trump is the Superman of Washington, D.C. He's saving it for a third time. This time, maybe literally saving it. You know? I'm not even sure why we need the District of Columbia, if I'm being honest here. You know, if nothing else, it's just a shithole that you don't want other countries to see. You know, it's very embarrassing to see any sort of video from any of our major cities that are just like open air drug dens. Like Baltimore is an absolute God. San Francisco with the poop map. The fact that that exists is absolutely just, it's embarrassing. You think Shanghai has a poop map? Tokyo? Doubt it. I know they also don't have civil rights, but I don't know. There's a give and a take there. It can't be a coincidence, right? I don't know. Oh, what else was I going to talk about? Oh, yeah. This is the best part of the whole thing. So, I'm working, some of you know this. I know Merc knows this. Merc, aka Mercury, aka Mercury. So I've been doing a deep dive on the Oklahoma City bombing in my very limited spare time. And for those of you who are familiar with me on the Twitchers, I have started to mention a couple of things. I started doing this deep dive 3 or 4 months ago, maybe 6 months ago. I don't know. Time kind of runs together at this point. But Tucker Carlson had a lady on, Barbara something, I forget her name, talking about the Oklahoma City bombing. And she did not editorialize very much on that episode, which I very much appreciated. You know, Tucker will editorialize for you, apparently. But she mentioned, of all the things she mentioned, I knew probably 95% of them. And there are some things in there that I was thinking that she mentioned. That was the 5% which she had mentioned. But long story short, I've been working on this. I've been doing a deep dive. I've been looking into it. I've gone down the rabbit hole, as it were. One of the things that I've found as kind of a baseline thing is, and when I say baseline, I mean more of most of you who've were alive at the time and coherent and could remember or have looked into it any little bit, John Doe number 2 has disappeared. And I don't mean that like figuratively, I mean like initially there was John Doe number 1 and number 2, which there's a sketch of both of them. We've all seen John Doe number 1, which they tell us is Tim McVeigh. But John Doe number 2, who was allegedly with McVeigh and was given this, or was the sketch was made by the description of the same person, has disappeared from the zeitgeist at all. He disappeared from the case that the feds brought against Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. He's gone. They say he doesn't exist. So my teaser for this episode about the Oklahoma City bombing and some of the research that I found is not even John Doe number 2, but it does play into this. But the teaser is the surveillance tape. That also doesn't exist now. There was a little back and forth of one of the GCs about, and what led me down this and what got me into where is the surveillance tape and asking about a surveillance tape, because you have to kind of go back in time. In 1995, there was closed-circuit television in a lot of places, in a lot of public places, buildings. It wasn't just for government only. Malls, shopping centers, video stores. I mean, it was convenience stores. It was not uncommon to have a closed-circuit television, or CCTV. And what TV means, or closed-circuit television means, is that it's not being fed into a bigger thing. So basically, let's say you have 4 cameras on your convenience store. Those 4 cameras are going to feed back into, at the time, VCRs, which has a VHS tape, which is magnetic tape, which you would load in there. You might have a series of VCRs, so it wouldn't ever, the tape wouldn't run out. So you might have 1 camera going to 2 VCRs. You might have all cameras going to the 2 VCRs and recording onto 1 piece of tape. And then they would record the video onto VHS tapes. So that's kind of what you were dealing with back in 1995. I bring that up for many reasons, one of which is, let's say, so the timing of the Oklahoma City bombing is very important. So it happens on April the 19th, 1995 at roughly 4, not 4, I was writing a 4, at roughly 9:03 a.m. the bomb goes off. Okay. How they're able to get a sketch of the people who are responsible was they were able to track the bombing vehicle, and they were able to track the bombing vehicle because they found a rear axle roughly a block away. I think it was 525 feet away. It was on another street. The first question, I had heard this way back in the day. I didn't really think much of it. Every vehicle for a long time, all of the major components have at least a partial VIN number on them. The engine, transmission, front and rear axles are all going to have at least a partial VIN, if not the full VIN number. The VIN, for people who don't know, is a vehicle identification number. It is unique to that vehicle. The last 8 are unique to that specific vehicle. Okay? The last 8 of a VIN will tell you about a specific, it's tattooed to that. So you'll have like the 8th digit, I'm going to get too deep in the weeds about VIN numbers, but the 8th digit from the right is going to be the year model of that vehicle. All the numbers before it, that's basically that vehicle's specific VIN number that tattoos it to that specific vehicle. So it's not crazy that they found a piece of the vehicle, a major component of the vehicle. We're able to pull the partial VIN, in this case the last 8 of the VIN number, pull that partial VIN, which leads to the larger VIN, which will then, you can follow that trail. It's pretty obvious how you follow that trail of who manufactured it, contact manufacturer, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, especially when you have this in a database that they allegedly had at the time, DMV records, what have you. It's very, I think everyone can understand how you can trace a VIN number back to a specific vehicle and where it was sold or what have you, who bought it, blah, blah, blah. The problem I have with this, which is a glaring problem that no one seems to ask, is how did they know what vehicle they were looking for or what type of vehicle they were looking for? And I ask this because they found that axle, that rear axle, the next day. I don't know what time that it was found, but a citizen called, I believe, the FBI tip line, if not the OKC PD, but most likely was probably the FBI, who set up comms really, really quickly. He found it because it hit his car and was laying in the street, so he called and said, here's this thing. The FBI goes over, secures it, looks at it, and then they call in a guy named Mike McPherson from the Oklahoma City Police Department, who was currently working the bomb squad at the time, or was tasked or assigned to the bomb squad at the time, who was actively looking through the rubble of the devastation of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. They called him over, and he's the one who actually pulled the partial VIN off of there. Again, I will ask, how did they possibly know what they were possibly looking for? By his own account, quote from Mr. McPherson, Officer McPherson, he just knew that was from the bomb vehicle. Again, you have to kind of delete what you already know and act like you're coming at this from day one. How would you possibly know what the vehicle is that you're looking for? The bomb went off roughly 24 hours ago, and now you know for a fact you found the rear axle of the bomb vehicle. How could you possibly know that without a surveillance video? And the reason I told you how surveillance video worked and closed circuit television worked back in the day was because even if you had a camera that was facing right where the hole in the ground is from the bomb, you would have to find those servers, and then you would have to get the not the servers, you would have to find the VCRs, get the VCRs, then review the tape. It's an active bomb scene where people are looking for other people. They don't know if there's another bomb, by the way. They don't know that this isn't an inside job. And it's all hands on deck trying to save lives while kind of trying to investigate as well. How could you possibly, within 24 hours, know for a fact what vehicle you're looking for? Because here's the other part. The federal government tells us that no surveillance video exists of this happening. Even though, in their case, they said that they saw Tim McVeigh on surveillance video in the Ryder truck. But now they say no video exists. So that's how I'll leave you with that teaser of how could you possibly know what you're looking for if you didn't even know what you're looking for in the year of our Lord, 1995. So that is going to conclude this episode. Thank you for listening. Those of you who listen later, thank you very much. Those of you who would like to join in, there is now I'm running a space on Twitter that is going to, or X, still doesn't feel right calling it X. There's a space that exists for a Q&A after this podcast. I don't know if there's anyone in there or anyone who wants to ask a question, but I'm going to keep doing this, and hopefully people will kind of file in. But I'll leave you with this, everyone. Thank you, and remember what you're fighting for, everybody.